Why are we all here? Two words: dairyman's success. Everything comes from the dairyman's viability and sustainability, and we heard our DHI director, DHI director, referring to that. And then the next reason we're here, because we all have something to do with the dairy information industry. And if I refer to it as DHI, please just expand it in your mind to think of it as the dairy information industry. If you have any questions that are burning at any time when I'm making a statement, because I'll make a few that may upset some people, don't be afraid to make your comments. Put your hand up. We can talk about those kinds of things. So there is a famous poem by Paul Harvey. It says, "And on the 8th day, God made a farmer." And he goes on to say, the farmer not only worked in the field, but he went at night to the school board meeting. And so he was a community person. And that's why every one of you is here today. Yes, some of you are employed, some of you are directors, but you're all here because you're a community person. But you're more than that. You're a community leader. The community in this case is the community of dairy information, or the dairy industry, and I'll get expanded out to do that. Now there is one document that's in your files that's very, very useful for you. The DHI, we won't refer to it in a lot of ways, but it's the annual report. So it says collaboration, credibility, and connectivity. And when I saw that, I said, did Jay really need to invite me to come? Because that's what we're going to have as our theme. And if you just turn over to the back, you'll see what the mission of DHIA is and the vision statement. So you have all the details that you're going to need when you get to the annual meeting this afternoon. Now I better get on with things. So some people, I've given this type of a speech before, but this is my view, and it's based on what I see as the possible needs and opportunities. And when I made a presentation like this in Canada, somebody said, well, why are the cows going outside? Well, we got grass-fed milk. We got all kinds of things coming down the road. So we have a barn in the back and this. And so the first thing I want to talk to you about is innovate, create, and step up. And I know you can't read what the next one comes, words that are in the lower left there, but I'm going to ask you, I'll get organized here yet, we're limited on space. Did you come here to polish the furniture or create the future? How many came here to polish furniture? By that, everyone came here to create the future, and that's what we're here for. What's the profile? I want to know what the profile. How many people in the room are with DHI, or a DHI, or NDHI, or a farmer, a herdsman? How many here are from a service industry, such as other data sources or things like, or organizations like that? A few of those. So the majority are here because you're a farm leader. Because they're probably in my discussion, we're going to be talking about farmers, farm leaders, elected leaders, that is. We're going to be talking about organizations, and then we're going to be talking about the collective organizations that we have in the United States. I must admit, to start off, I'm a Canadian. I've worked in the dairy improvement industry. I couldn't keep a job because I ran a DHI. I was the assistant manager for Holstein Canada for a long while. Worked for the AI industry as a counterpart to NAAB. And then I did 10 years of international consulting. So what I see in the United States, I've had a lot of associations. I hate to tell you, but the first year that I attended an NDHI meeting was in Pennsylvania in 1971. So that's quite a long while ago. And I've been to 2 or 3 since then. But when I was no longer with running a DHI, I went on and did other things in the industry, and so I didn't see it as much. So what is vision? Because that's what we're going to be talking about, vision and leadership. So vision, the first one is, vision is the art of seeing the impossible. Now guys like Dave Thorburn, he has to think about all these kinds of things because he's leading an organization. The vision of seeing is the art of seeing the impossible. Jonathan Swift said that. The next one about vision is, where you come from is not really as important as where you're going. And that one doesn't have anyone that they've quoted in saying that. And the last one is, a vision without execution is hallucination. And Thomas Edison said that. And I think those fit for what we're looking at here this morning. So let's go on to vision. Now I'm sorry that these won't show up, but we'll just keep going here. So the dairy industry in the United States, we got cattle that came from Europe, and they started herd books. But those were protectionist organizations. They were in protecting the investors because they had invested in bringing that animal across the country, across the ocean to this country. And they dealt on purity and what the animal looked like and what color it was and all those things. And after a while, people started saying, well, how much milk does this cow give? So DHIs came in. I see DHIs, according to the, on your left-hand side over here, have been around for 114 years. Breed associations have been around for maybe almost 150, but maybe not quite that long. AI's been around for over 80 years. So they're all established organizations that are serving your industry. And there's been many advancements. They measured cows' butterfat production for 7 days to begin with, and it goes on and on. We got genetic evaluations, and we got protein, and we got all kinds of traits added to it. And we heard reference this morning to MUN and other ones that have come along. And the United States dairy industry has been very successful at the improvement of the dairy cattle. In agriculture too as well in the United States, in 1920, the farmer fed 19 people. In 1970, they fed 26. I thought that might be higher, but that's what they say. It's fed 26. But go on to 2013, and they fed 155. So things are speeding up, and that's what we're faced with in the DHI business, is speeding up. Another reference, and you can see these if you're on Facebook, they seem to pop up on mine fairly regularly. Since 1944, cows now produce 443% as much milk as they did in 1944. They use 10% as much land to produce a unit of milk. They use 35% as much water. It takes 21% as many cows and 23% as much feed. So there's been great success in the U.S. industry, but where are we at right today? Last year there were 40,000 farms, and I know there was a figure, and I can't quote you the year, but there was 120,000 some time back. So the number has been dropping significantly. If you take the 9.3 million cows or thereabouts there are in the United States, there are 234 cows per herd. Now, I was getting these stats from Jay. 65% of the cows are on some form of milk recording. 53% are on what I'm going to say milk recording that can go into genetic evaluations. So DHI, you're the data people. You've got a possibility right now, which is the people that are using your service, having at least 60% of the farms using your service. One of the things that surprised me about doing the research was that 15% of the animals were registered. And the reason I say that surprised me, because in Europe or in my home country of Canada, it's much higher than that. So what happened? What about the other 85% of the farms? How do they get represented? Is it through DHI when things start moving forward? Is that fair to DHI? So I have some questions for that one later on, but that's a question that I have. I don't know the exact figure, Dave, but I think it's about 80% of the cows are bred AI. It varies across the country, but in that neighborhood. And because the NAAB talk about vials of sold, they don't talk about how many cows are bred, but that's the estimate that I did receive. So DHI and AI are really the main players in livestock improvement in the United States. And you had significant global influence in the past. The United States is the gold standard for many things, DHI programs being one of them. People look up to the United States, and you've sent all kinds of genetics around the world. By far the leading country when it comes to sending genetic material around the world. But we're also talking about feeding the US consumer in the future. And we'll get into the scope of what you do. But the prediction is that the number of people in the United States will remain relatively level. And so but right now, 23% of the milk that you ship goes for fluid, 77% for solids. And that has been changing, and you see lots of discussion on that. Why are we selling this much milk? And so on. And it is going to be more solids. If you go to other countries in the world, it's even a much higher percent that is solid, that doesn't go as fluid. And right now, in the United States as well, about 15% of the grocery cart cost goes to the farmer, and dairy is above that. I don't know an exact figure, but it may be 30 to 35%. Grains and oilseeds is about 6%. So you do have as far as the amount that you get, it's not high enough. I understand that, but it's the consumer is supporting you, and you need to keep worrying of ways to do that, and I'm not here to talk about that today. The next 2 billion people in the world will not be born in North America, South America, or Europe. They'll be born in Asia or Africa, and Africa is the area, and so that's where the market is. If you're going to be in the business of marketing or shipping milk outside of the United States, and with milk goes breed improvement or improvement programs. So when your government's sending the milk out there, they also should be making sure that they're also, if you just want those countries to be successful, you're going to need to be worrying about getting the milk out there and to get your technology out to the field. Oh, no wonder I couldn't do it. I'm just going, I'll learn how to use this yet. So we've clicked down, we've covered this slide, and we'll move on to the next one, see what happens. Try this. Okay. In the last 10 years, there's been severe, major pressures. This is kind of the last review slide. Major pressures in the dairy industry. Genomics has come along. You can like or dislike that. Sex semen, and that's changed the whole way things happen. Production and margins and herds have all changed. Production's gone up, margin's gone down, herds gone down. One of the big factors for the farmer is if you were selling breeding stock, you aren't selling it now. And that isn't going to come back. It's just a plain and simple fact that you're not going to have that revenue, and you might have used that revenue to pay your DHI fees. But it isn't going to be there in the future, anywhere really in the world. There will be some embryos being sold, but farmers around the world will be getting their genetics from breeding companies. And I call artificial insemination organizations, I'm calling them breeding companies because they're selling you a package, and they'll sell you embryos as well as semen. Now, one of the things that's happened in the last 10 years is technology, and in your handout you also got a single page that talked about all the technologies that are going to happen until 2027. And it's not exact, it's not particular, but it is reality. This is what's going to happen. Technology is coming into the industry. So that's another thing that's happened in the last, and it's been coming for the last 10 years. Privatization of genetic evaluations. Like it or not, breeding companies are going to have their own indexes for different traits that they are marketing. And so you're going to have to believe or not believe that index, but it won't be CDCB issuing the index. That's the reality of where things are at. When you go out to buy your truck, you can go online and find it, but you generally have to know if you're going to believe the organization that's selling you that truck. Are they going to stand behind it? So it's going to be different than just having a large number of genetic evaluations out there. There's going to be new traits, especially for health and fertility, and we've heard those mentioned. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that. It's been coming. New suppliers, and we heard a little bit about that yesterday. We heard one speaker was talking about supplying data systems out there. Trade and export has really changed. And the other thing that's happened a lot in the last 10 years, I just picked out 10 things, there's probably other ones that you could think of. Mergers and consolidations have been there, and they're going to continue to be there. So in the last 10 years, data has been used to make more decisions than ever before, and it's going to get more so. The industry isn't going to go back. The pace is going to speed up. So as choices really are out there is that are you going to move forward? Are you going to move into a new course and do new things? Or are you going to sit where you are now? So I went out and I thought, how do I go about getting information for a speech? So with the help of a few individuals, I got 20 names together of people from across the United States, from farmers to researchers, the whole area across there. And I asked them if I could have a half hour of their time. 18 of the 20 said yes. Surprised me I didn't get that many, maybe, but 18. I thought it would be half an hour. I don't think anyone I spent just a half hour with. Sometimes I phoned them back again. And so what they said that they saw was what the DHI, how they looked at DHI today was it providing enough added value for the services? And the DHI was going to have to look at things as value added rather than least costs. There's going to be large amounts of data being left on farms right now that's of value to the farmer, hopefully, but also of value to the industry, but it isn't getting into a central database. DHI needs to find ways to replace labor with technology. So these are comments. I spent, I think maybe 14 hours on the phone with different people, so I did get a lot of different ideas. DHI was slow to work with robotic herds and companies. You may disagree with some of these, but that's what I tried to boil it down. Third-party verification is not as important as it once was. I heard that many times. I heard many times, are you worried about having everything 100% accurate, or is 95% accurate good enough? The farmer has to decide that in what they make decisions on. But we spend a lot of money getting that last 5% accuracy on farms. The scope of DHI, because I'm maybe behind here, am I? Scope of DHI records needs to include all aspects of the dairy farm, and I'll cover that a little bit later. DHI is losing its position as the lead data source in the industry. DHI data is willingly shared and used by others. So that was a plus for DHI. You share your information very willingly with others. just carry on. I know these are a long list, but I found that they were repeated. Duplication and lack of cooperation amongst data information providers is a problem. Data on the farm in the various technologies is not linked, and the farmer has to interpret that and move it back and forth. Why is that? DHI puts too much emphasis on rules and accuracy. Now, we did hear about ICAR and all those rules and everything, but that was the opinion of at least, I think it was 3 people who said that to me. Not enough research on data and systems is being supported by DHI. And I know it's tight times and all those things, but that was an opinion. More phenotypic data is needed for genomics, for accuracy and new traits. Margins will be tight in the future. Dairymen need to get more for less from their DHI service. We'll go back. The last one I found to be very important. Get ready for larger herds and vertical integration. And I had at least 4 people tell me that they could see coming down the road of groups getting together and having 100,000 cows in this group, and a DHI service will need to bid for the 100,000 cows, as will AI, as will anyone else. And the prediction by 2 of them was that over 60% of the cows in the United States would be in groups, larger groups than we've seen in the past. Not just one herd, a group of farmers going together. And the other reason they saw that was they could see farmers going together to get get higher prices for the sale of their milk, bidding for that, and even setting up and doing processing themselves, and that vertical integration was going to come in the industry like it has in poultry and has in swine. Now we can say we don't like that. I don't like it, but I think it probably is a reality. I grew up on a small farm and had a small herd of cows and everything. Just like many of you. But times are changing. So there are probably other things that you could see, but those are the things that these 18 people said to me about where the industry was going. What's the vision for the industry? So the opportunities are ahead, and we'll talk about those, about a strong industry, about a dynamic industry, about a strong farmer organizations, and especially about strong farms. I think if I do some more clicking, I'll get there. So we're going to talk just to start with about the systems that are out there. DHI is one of them. They must have value added. We talked about that. But you won't be alone, I expect. You'll need partners working with you to provide this service. So it isn't whether the DHI is going to do everything. You're going to need to be working with others. One of the important things for me is that we're going to need to be covering entire herds. Calves, heifers, milking cows, transition cows, and yes, a beef herd. What percentage are bred beef now, Dave? Quite high in some areas, right? So you're going to have all these different aspects, and you're going to need information from them. It isn't just the milking cow. It isn't just the milk sample that you're going to need. You're going to need to go beyond that. So it's going to be an entire herd. You're going to need to automate wherever possible. Parlors and all the rest of that. Joint services with other partners, economy of scale, you're going to have to worry about things like that, not just the service. Every new data capture device that comes along, you're going to need to worry about that. Another system you're going to need to worry about is the fact, or be concerned about, is that on a farm, you're going to need to be concerned about right from where the fields all the way to the consumer. So how does what you do on the field affect the cows, get to the consumer, pay the banker? Well, I guess you pay the banker. Sometimes you have to pay your spouse first, but they seem to sometimes lose on that one. Another thing that we're going to have to be concerned about is product guarantees. The attitude when I was growing up was the milk goes onto the, what was in cans then, under the cans, it's onto the truck, it's not my problem anymore. That isn't going to be the case in the future. You're going to need to be able to satisfy the consumer that you have animal welfare, that there's food safety, and all these factors that are going to be in there. And you're going to need to be able to document it. It isn't just that, oh, we always do a good job. You know, farmers always do a good job. Yes, they do. But you're going to need to be able to have documentation, just like we do for traceability and other factors that are going to be there. So the whole system of what you have is going to be much more complicated on your farms. So when I looked at this slide and my son made it up, I wondered why he picked that slide. But in actual fact, I found after I thought about it for a while, it was an excellent slide because all the cogs aren't hooking up right now. All the wheels aren't lining up. So there's a lot of work to be done in lining things up on systems that are going to support the sale of milk eventually. You see, we sold our systems in breeds and DHI and AI and different ones on loyalty. But that isn't going to be the way of the future. Loyalty isn't going to be the way that you can carry it. It's going to be a business model that you're going to have to follow. Other opportunities in improvement. One of the things that the people who serve the industry, and I'm as guilty as anyone else, is that we produce all kinds of facts and figures for you. But you have to interpret every one of them. There's no dollars and cents, well, net merit dollars, but I'm not 100% sure I know what that means when it gets down to the end. Sorry about that, John, but that's the way I look at it. What does 30% preg rate mean? What's that mean in your farm? How many dollars does that mean? What does a 6.1 for calving ease mean? We got all these numbers out there. We mystify everything. And it isn't just the genetic side, it's the DHI side as well. Why can't we have things in dollars and cents? And maybe it has to be many variables for your farm and other areas, but we make the information business so difficult. There's going to be lots of measures coming at you shortly on efficiency, feed efficiency, well, they're already out there, I suppose, and all those facts. But if you take feed, there is one called income over feed cost, I think it's called. Feed costs are about 53 to 55, or 50 to 55% of your costs on your farm, depending on how you calculate it and so on. That's the biggest cost you got. And we're going to see a whole lot of more numbers on feed efficiency, but we need to see those in areas because net returns is what it's all going to be about. There's going to be new traits, there's going to be epigenetics, there's going to be nutrigenetics, and epigenetics is just as simply if this cow worked best in this environment or this calf grew best in this environment, and those kinds of things, and a number of those factors. These better on grazing and these better in the barn and so on. The one that's going to be a little difficult to sell to the consumer is the gene editing. But the industry is going to have to get at that one soon because otherwise it will be excluded. A lot of work in California about knocking genes in and knocking them out. I think that's the term that they use. And it's all on, so far it's been on the horn and polled area. But there will be lots more. And it will be possible, in my opinion, that we will have, be able to take the best and make those genes replicated in many more animals than we have in the past. But there'll need to be some technology in areas there. Research and innovation, there can't be enough of it. We heard yesterday the comment that there's less money and less researchers in universities across the United States than there used to be. And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality. But DHI and all information processing ones are going to need to address that area of research. Now the next, you're going to have to bear with me just for a second here, but if on your farm, take your right hand. Everyone raise their right hand. What's the most important one thing that you're on your farm?
Cows.
People. Cows? People. People you employ. What's the next thing that's most important? Marketing, where you sell your milk. Those are the two that are most important. The next one I'm going to put up is feed. Genetics, management. On a farm, those are probably the biggest areas, but people and management is going to be the biggest one that you're going to have to look at. Now, producer needs, and we heard the discussion, nice discussion yesterday about some of the producers' needs. Bruce was one of the ones sitting up in the panel, but there were 2 or 3 producers out in the audience that were making comments on what do the producers need. So I spent a little bit of time looking up what producers say they need. So this is a Zoetis, what are the biggest, most critical areas for profit on a farm? They've got 6 listed, on a dairy farm, sorry. The first one was lowering somatic cell score. Biggest profit area was lowering somatic cell score. The next one was highest energy corrected milk. The next one was lowering death losses. The next one was lowering net replacement costs. The next was higher pregnancy rates. And the final one was higher heifer survival rates. You'll notice that at least 3 of those had nothing to do with the cows. It was either cows and heifers or heifers. So you're going to need, from that study, you're going to need to be concerned about providing a service of what farmers need. Some of the other ones, is Neil Petrini in the room today? I can't see him. So Neil is the manager of DHI, but Richard Canton was the one who would have done the work on this, one of his associates there. And last year at the Canadian Outdoor Farm Show, they had a group of pails or something, and people could vote. They would get a golf ball and they put in what they thought was the most important thing that they wanted to find some new information about. Now it's not necessarily statistical. It won't stand up to John Cole's look at the research on it, but these were the areas that they identified, the farmers identified, and there was about a dozen or 15 areas they could drop the golf ball or whatever those balls were in. The first one they wanted to find something out about was calves and heifers. That surprised me. The next thing they wanted to find about was health and disease. No, we haven't even got hardly to very much on traditional milk recording. Milk quality, okay, milk quality. I don't know if milk quality would also, I assume, would be SCC. The next one was feed, the next one was reproduction, and the next was dry and transition for cows and heifers. None of those are things that you might be mainline in DHI. Another group I found, and this is Canadian again, I admit, but there's a group at the University of Guelph, and it's a veterinary side. It's called Population Medicine, and so they surveyed 700 farmers across Canada. I know it's Canada, but I'm not certain that there's much difference. And they asked them what was the biggest management thing that they were looking at, that they would be concerned about into the future. And the biggest management thing that they were concerned about was animal welfare as it affected consumers. How is the industry going to fare in animal welfare? The next one was reproduction health. The next one was cost of disease. Do we have any idea on our farms what the cost of disease are? Longevity. No, we do get into that one. And other health. And then on diseases, what was the most prevalent disease? Anyone want to estimate what was the most prevalent disease on the mind of these 700 farmers? Mastitis, you said? That was number 2. Number 1 was lameness. Number 2 was mastitis. Number 3 was calf diarrhea. Number 3 was early embryonic death or abortion. And the final one was respiratory diseases. Those are what farmers said they wanted. Have you and DHI gone out and say, what do you really want, farmers? How am I doing on time?
Keep going.
People, we'll move a little faster here. Farms need much more from the supervisor visit. We talked about that. Proactive and progressive dairy farmers often do not want to serve on boards of directors. And that's a real challenge. I have a very good friend that I encouraged to get involved in a board of directors. And he did. And then a year and a half later he said, I'm quitting. Why? Seemed to be sharing often on the idea of what was going on. He said, you go to the meetings, you don't have enough background, you make the same old decisions and nothing happens. We need to redefine DHI's role is another area. We need to design for the next generation. Because they're all virtual. They all got their phones and everything else, and you got your phone and all the things. That's what it's going to be. Going to seminars is really not how the next generation is going to get its information. It's going to be virtual. We'll just keep moving ahead quickly here. And but people do make the difference. As far as information is concerned, visions in this area, the U.S. dairy herds are ready for more data information that they will use. One of the areas that I was looking up DHI, and it was into the history, it says one of the mottos or things used to be measure to manage. But we forgot that we should be measuring. Did we park measuring? Did we stall on what we were measuring? We need to cover cows from conception to removal, death, or whatever happens. We talked about the whole field and area, all the way from the field to the consumer. And we have to mine the databases as much as possible. Innovation will pay huge dividends to the industry as we go forward. DHI is not, US is not alone in this. The Netherlands went through this. New Zealand went through this. Denmark, we heard the comments there. They have a common database. So we're going to need to look at ways to do things together. One of the things I heard 5 times out of the 18 people I spoke with was we need to get a blank whiteboard, you know, one of those eraser boards, and we need to create the industry again. Now that would say, no, we start from here, you can't do that. But we heard about strategic planning comments earlier. So there's going to be many things that we have to look at in the future. We'll just move along quickly here. So leadership. You're all leaders. You're out there. And I've got some areas up here. And there's a leadership. Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. Leadership is your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more. You are a leader if you do that. Leadership is not about the next election. It's about the next generation. And so I went back to the interviews that I did with the people and some of the things about leadership that they felt. Dairymen, so they felt dairymen-owned data organizations are not always cooperating. We kind of heard that. And the dairymen are the loser. Current competition fragments the industry and will be the downfall of the dairy improvement industry. Why duplicate? Mergers and coalitions and so on are needed. They're going to have to happen. Economies of scale, innovation, all seem to be a low priority on DHI boards. Sorry, I'm not keeping up here. DHI, dairymen and staff want change, but the boards don't seem to approve it. I don't know if that's right, but that's what I heard. Not enough dairymen with a stake in the future are on the boards of directors. Data and information needs to be, there needs to be a report card for every organization to report back so that it's publicly available. Boards of directors are much more than annual meetings and financial statements, and the overarching structure of CDCB, PDCA, NAB, NDHI needs reworked. I heard that over half the time in the people I spoke with, because it doesn't have 85% of the producers involved, and it's only about genetics. And it doesn't have processors, and it doesn't have consumers. And you think about improvement, about a third of it's probably genetic, and a third of it's nutrition, and a third of it's management. If you think about the genetic side, and that's the one I know best, there are probably only going to be 5 to 7 genetic suppliers, breeding companies around the world. You have the leading ones in your country, but there are some others that are significant. But the whole area of working together, future leadership, is not business as usual. It's something different than that. I'm sorry this doesn't come up very well. At the top I have a board of directors, and the bottom I have the producers. And that's our traditional way. We have their top down, status quo, decide and tell. But really it needs to be the other way around. The board needs to be at the bottom in a creative model that talks about development, sets the tone, and sends the message up. And the other thing that's going to make that happen is you're going to have to take 10% of the budgets out of your organizations and send it to research and innovation. And you say, how's that possible? Just quit worrying about that last 5% of accuracy. Because you spend a lot of money on that last 5%. And none of us like to give anything up. But if we don't do research and innovation, we won't be here. So, some of the things that we looked at as far as leadership, innovate, you have to be willing to say, my organization needs to merge with another one. Whoop. Oh, they're all up there, sorry. So it's a virtual world. We talk about technology transfer. It'll be virtual. And you have to use the information that's there. I ask you, if you knew more about a calf when it was born, how it grew, if it had disease and all those things, could you have an extra half a lactation out of that animal at the end of their lifetime? We don't know the answer to that. I spoke with a dairyman last week, and he told me that he keeps exact records on his calves on his farm. If a calf doesn't get the scours and doesn't get pneumonia, they last a half a year longer, have a lactation longer. That's just one farm. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at as far as to innovate. We need to create. Communication strategies we've had are getting there, but they're still about the year 2000. We need to educate, and we need to integrate. You need to step up. Are you prepared to step up? Will you guide change? Are you prepared to lead that change? Because most of the things we have now were built on the past. We need to redefine our organizations. So I have some quick thoughts that are just my points of view, but you have to have a starting point. So let's say today is the starting point to change. How's that going to happen? You're going to have to work with others and what I would call have a futures group, a leadership team with a neutral chair. You need to communicate that you're doing this for the farmers and the stakeholders. You need to find the resources. You're going to have to find that 10% somewhere. But definitely there needs to be some restructuring of the U.S. dairy improvement industry. Because you still, see, we're still carrying with us that exclude. We don't take robot records in, because they're only 95% accurate. But if cows milk 3 times a day, there's 90 data points there, and we're only taking 1 or 2 or 3 of those data points in. And if we also knew that cow, if she was sick, or what the temperature was outside, and everything else, it could very well be that we're inaccurately ranking animals in the population, more cows probably than bulls, because we don't know the environmental factors that are occurring on a farm. So instead of excluding organizations like that have data, or whichever ones they are, we need to include them in what we're going. Old ways will not open new doors. You're going to have to take some risks. There is a saying that my wife, who's here with me, doesn't like me saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. There's a saying that says, lead, follow, or move aside. George Patton said that at the end of the Second World War. Lee Iacocca said that, Lee Iacocca of Ford and then Chrysler fame, said that as well. Lead, follow, and move aside. Well, at the bottom, when I don't postpone making decisions, just because you got to get unanimity, it's never going to happen. The ball is in your court. It's sitting out there in your court today. Are you going to accept the challenges? The challenges being things like, are you going to lead? Are you going to cooperate with others? We're back to my hand again. Data, big data. We heard all about big data. This is the hand. We got technologies and innovation, and we got communication. The opportunities are out there. It's not what you're currently doing that you need to know. It's what you don't know that you need to do. Precision agriculture is there. Precision dairying is there. Look at the number of companies that are out there funding that, private companies. So moving to the future, you have 2 choices. You can be part of it, or you can watch it happen around you. I challenge you to be part of it. Thank you.